What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Hawk Talk on Melrose channel, where you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and YouTube. Whatever platform you are on, make sure you follow us, leave a review, and share with your friends. That's all we ask, and let's roll. All right, here we go. I got some things to talk about regarding Iowa football and basketball, so figured I would do an episode today. It's been a couple weeks since we have done one. Tyler and I did one shortly after Mark Gronowski committed to the Hawks, which was obviously huge news for us at the time. And then a couple days later, we hear the news that he's going to be out all spring ball, getting surgery done on his shoulder. Kind of old news, so I'm not going to touch on it too long, but I do kind of have my thoughts on that, short and sweet. Then going to get into some other Iowa football related news, and then also something fun towards the end. I put together all the quarterbacks that have been with Iowa since 2017 and where they're at now, what their stats are now at their other schools. And it is truly remarkable how bad it was and it has been. And hopefully with Tim Lester, things will change. But we're going to do that at the end. But before we do all that, I do want to touch on Iowa basketball. We're going to start off with that first. So yeah, Iowa basketball. On this episode, we could sit here right now and go through the remaining games. Okay, this should be a win. This should be a win. Okay, we need to steal this one to make the tournament. Okay, are we going to make the tournament? Are we not going to make the tournament? We could do that right now. But frankly, I don't think none of that matters. Regardless of if we make it or not. And I hope as a fan, we do make it. I hope we go on a run and we make it. But even if we do, the big question is, should this be Fran's last year? Do we move on from him? Do we go in a different direction after this year? And if you polled Iowa fans, I feel like 90-95% of fans would say, yes, it is time. And I am one of those 90-95% of fans. It is time to move on. I don't say that lightly. I just think the apathy in the fan base is at an all-time low. You have lost so many fans. So many fans are just not interested in the program anymore. And that is a major problem that Beth Getz needs to solve and figure out. These last few games, the USC, UCLA, Minnesota, Wisconsin, those games did not help the cause. It has made it even probably worse. And you look at the crowd against Minnesota. I have a buddy that lives in Iowa City, goes to all the games. He always sends me the crowd. He does a video, like a 360 video. The Minnesota game, that was the worst crowd I've ever seen for a Big Ten game that I've ever seen. It was horrible. Penn State game wasn't much better. And that's a Friday night game. People are just over it. Like, they're done. I just don't think you can continue with Fran. I just don't think you can. And the excuse of, it's an 8:00 game, or it's a weeknight game, or, the weather's not very good. I get that as excuses, but that's not a real excuse, because you look at the women's team and they constantly sell out games. They constantly have almost a full crowd in the stands. Now, yeah, there might be a few sections here or there where there's some spotty seats open, but for the most part, the arena is full. Iowa men's basketball back in the day. I lived in Ames from 2015 to 2019. We went to a lot of games during those years because it was a 2-hour drive. I don't remember it being this bad. Like, I remember the crowds actually being pretty good. Now, yes, the student section has always been kind of iffy. There's always been some empty seats in the student section. There's always going to be, on the upper deck or the upper, for last 5 or 6 rows, there's going to be some empty seats. But for the most part, the arena was full or almost full. And okay, what has changed from then and now? Games back in the day were during the weeknights. Games back in the day were 8:00 games. Games back in the day had some bad weather from time to time in the month of January or February. And you still saw decently good crowds. So what has changed? The apathy in the fan base. People are just done. People are over it. People are done with the lack of defense. People are done with the softness of this team, always getting constantly out rebounded. People are done with just being a team that's just never quite athletic enough. People are done with even the good teams that we have had, the Garza years, the Murray, even those years, can never make it to the Sweet 16. People are done with that. People are just over it. And with Fran, he's had a good tenure at Iowa. I mean, you think about what he did coming in, and kind of changing we were at the lowest of the low during the Licklider era. And he comes in and he kind of turns everything around. Make the NIT the first few years. We start making the tournament. You think about the years with Garza in the Murrays. We go to the tournament. We won the Big Ten tournament. It was great. It's all good and all. But then you really think about it. With those teams of Garza and Wieskamp and the Murray twins, guys that are in the NBA, how did we never make it to the Sweet 16? How did we never make it to the second weekend? And you pair that up with now the last few years just kind of being average, just not quite good enough to really make a splash. And you pair all that up, and this is where you leave with feeling no excitement, not interested, and the reality is starting to settle in. And I think that's kind of where we are at with this program and with the fan base. And I just feel like Beth Goetz needs to make a change. There just needs to be a rebrand. Go out, get a new head coach, create some excitement in the fan base. You're going to see some new players because I'm sure if Fran leaves, there's going to be players that leave, and the new coach is going to bring in some of his own players and get back some of the fan base, kind of rejuvenate the program a little bit, get some new uniforms. I know it's something stupid, but I really feel like our uniforms outside of the Iowa Gold script, I feel like our uniforms are just awful. Get some new uniforms. Just everything just kind of changed, like a new era. And I think regardless, it might go to hell, right? We might look back 5 years from now and be like, man, we really took for granted what Fran did. But I just think you got to take that risk because as of right now, the way you're going, it's not good. It's not a good direction if you continue with Fran because there's too many people, like I keep saying, there's too many people that are they're done with it. They're over it. They don't care what happens. And the only way you're going to get those fans back, or the only way you're going to create some buzz and some excitement, is by doing something different. I just feel like we're, once again, 15 years, it's just a long time. People are just wanting something different. Similar to Iowa football in a way with Kirk Ferentz, right? But Iowa basketball, it's even worse. It's even worse. With Iowa football, you still sell out games. The crowds are still full. There's still like people get excited about it. With basketball, it is complete opposite. So speaking of football, let's transition to that. Let's talk a little Mark Gronowski. Now, yes, the big news was him committing, but then shortly after that, news came out, kind of a Friday night news dump out of nowhere. He's going to be out all of spring, going to have shoulder surgery, and will not be back until June. Created a lot of raw reaction by the fan base, rightfully so, and a lot of negativity. And it's been a few weeks now, so I'm not going to, like I said, sit here and talk about it for 10, 15 minutes. It's kind of come and gone. We've kind of gotten over it. In my opinion, I don't think it's a huge deal. Now, yes, would you like to see our starting quarterback, because it's now been 3 years in a row, go through spring and actually be there for spring ball where you're building chemistry with your wide receivers and all that? Of course, obviously, that's not even a question, but it's really not that big of a deal. I think it's completely different than Cade. You're talking a guy that has played this entire year, right? His last game was in December. He's coming in. He's still going to be able to be with the team. He's still going to be able to move around a little bit. He obviously can't throw, but he'll be able to move around a little bit. He's still going to learn the offense. The only thing he's not going to really be able to do is, yes, build that chemistry with his wide receivers. But he's also going to be back by June, so he's going to have all summer. He's going to have all fall camp. Like, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. With Cade, you're talking like his first injury when he was out the first year in spring ball. You're talking almost a year and a half of him not playing football at all, right? In 2023, you think about it, when he came in fall camp, his last game that he played was the following September when he played that one game when Jim Harbaugh did, where he played one game, then JJ McCarthy played one game. So he played in one game, and then you have to go back all the way until January of the previous year when he played in the playoffs against Georgia. Okay, so just that alone, you look at Mark Gronowski now. When he comes back in June, the last time he played was in December, and he played for 5 months straight. He played in a lot of games, and he was playing with this injury. And that's another big thing too, is technically speaking, he could have played this year without having surgery. I think that's huge, right? When you really think about that, that's big. Like, he could have technically played. Obviously, with the torn ACL, you cannot play. Like, you have to get ACL surgery. But with Mark, it wasn't that bad of an injury. It was more of a repair than anything else. He could have played, but he elected, let's just get it done. Let's clean it up. Let's make sure I'm a 100% going to next year. Let's just do it. And I think it's the right thing. And think about it. This past year, he still put up great stats. He still led his team into the playoffs and pretty far in the playoffs with this injury that he has. So I just don't think it's that big of news. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think if anything, it gives guys like Hank Brown, Brendan Sullivan a chance to really kind of rise a little bit. I think this also helps maybe keep Sullivan around, because I really thought when we got Mark that Sullivan would probably leave after spring, but maybe if he goes through spring and looks pretty good and coaches feel good about Sullivan, I still think Mark's going to be the starter, but it gives Sullivan like, hey, let's go into summer. Let's go into fall. I'm going to compete, hopefully win the job. It's a good problem to have. Obviously having that quarterback competition gives Hank Brown, like I said, who's probably going to be the starter come 2026, a lot of reps. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I really don't. Obviously, when it first happened, that raw reaction of, oh my God, here we go again. K 2.0. I think it's the furthest from K 2.0 than anything. I think we'll be just fine. And then about a week after all that happened, we got the news that we landed a wide receiver commit, Sam Phillips out of Chattanooga, a much needed speedy type wide receiver that I think will work well in the Tim Lester offense. The biggest thing for him, though, is like, what will the impact be? Because like you look at like a guy like Seth Anderson, Charleston Southern had a great freshman year there. And, you thought like, okay, that's going to translate to playing in the Big Ten. And so far, and I think Seth Anderson's a good wide receiver, don't get me wrong, but definitely is not as productive as he was at Charleston Southern, rightfully so. And so you look at Sam Phillips, a type of guy that, put up great stats and, did really good at Chattanooga, but will that transition to Big Ten play? That's why I feel like last year, and I've talked about this on the podcast, when we got Jacob Gill, not many people talked about it. And I was like, man, I think this is a great get for us. Now, yes, he didn't put up the stats at Northwestern, but he was playing in the Big Ten, and he has that experience going up against Big Ten corners and Big Ten defenses. And I think that's huge. That's valuable. And you saw him coming into Iowa, and before you know it, he was a starter. And before you know it, he was kind of our number one option. So I think that's one thing to really kind of wait and see with Sam Phillips. Now, the good thing with Sam, and maybe not a good thing because I would like to have him more than 1 year, but he's only going to be here for 1 year. He's very experienced and he's very veteran, right? He's going to be a senior. Like Seth Anderson, he came in as like a sophomore, right? So he was still very young, still had to learn a lot of things. But with Sam, he's a little bit older, a little bit more seasoned. And so I think maybe that will translate better than maybe what Seth Anderson did. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I do think with Sam, he provides what we kind of need, and that's just speed. We need speed on the outside. We need guys to get separation. We need guys that can, catch the ball 5-10 yards and turn up field and get another 20 yards, right? We need guys like that. And you look at the wide receiver room now, as long as we stay healthy, I'm really liking it. Reese Vanderzee, Jacob Gill, Sam Phillips. I'm kind of envisioning those three guys kind of being your starters. Then you have Jarriett Bowie, Dane Howard, TJ Washington, Caden Weegan. Like, that's not bad. And you got some of the younger guys, KJ Parker, who I've heard nothing but good things about. So I'm really liking this wide receiver core. And I think we're probably done getting more wide receivers. I know we still have the spring portal window, but I think that is going to be more for trying to get a corner, which we desperately still need, and maybe an offensive tackle. I think we're probably going to land at least one or two more guys in the spring portal, but I don't think it's going to be wide receiver. I think we're pretty set on wide receiver. I think we got enough guys that are capable. Obviously, we're still somewhat kind of young, but I think we have a variety of some seasoned players, some veteran players, along with some younger dudes that hopefully will then just keep getting better. And I'm really excited about it. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm actually feeling pretty good about our wide receiver room. All right, we're going to end this podcast having some fun here. I don't know if it's fun. It's kind of embarrassing, but we're going to look back at the last almost decade long of quarterbacks that we have recruited and tried to develop. And since 2017, every single quarterback that has come through the room, not counting this year with the guys that we have now, have all since left. It is truly remarkable how bad it has been. So let's sit here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the screen. Starting in 2017, we recruited Payne Manziel. He ended up transferring to Abilene Christian. He started the first 2 years for them, but his last year there, he did not start. He ended up with over 2,000 total yards, 10 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Not very good. Then in 2018, Spencer Petras transferred to Utah State this last year. He ended up putting up, and this was total between Iowa and Utah State, over 7,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. Petras wasn't very good. He was probably the best quarterback out of all these guys. And I shouldn't say probably, he was. And that's kind of saying something because I just don't think Petras was that good of a quarterback. I really don't. Maybe if he would have had a better quarterbacks coach at Iowa, maybe he would have been better. But regardless, I mean, he was a pretty mediocre quarterback. Then in 2019, Alex Padilla ended up transferring to SMU and never saw the field. He was a backup. I'm pretty sure at one point he was a third string quarterback for them. He finished with 880 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And that's total playing at Iowa too, because if you don't recall, in 2022, played in a few games for Iowa. Then in 2020, Deuce Hogan transferred to Kentucky, was a backup, never saw the field, then ended up transferring to New Mexico State. And even there, he could never become the starter. He ended up being the backup, and he finished his career 52 total yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Then in 2021, we recruited Joe Labus. He ended up transferring to Central Michigan. He ended up getting hurt in the middle of the season, and he was out the rest of the year. He only played 6 games at Central Michigan this last year, and actually, he is coming back. I saw for 2025, he was a starter for them until he got hurt, and he had over 1,000 yards, 58% completion, 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So not great, especially when you're considering he's playing at Central Michigan. Then in 2022, Carson May transferred to Wyoming, was a backup, and now he has transferred to Albany Christian, and he was also the backup to them as well, and he has no stats that I could recall or I could find. And then 2023, Marco Linez transferred to Elon. We found that news out a couple of weeks ago, so we don't obviously have stats yet for him. 2023, we also got Deacon Hill, guy from Wisconsin. We all know about him, the famous Deacon Hill. The fact that we even won 10 games with him is pretty astonishing. He ended up transferring to Utah Tech. He started the first 4 games, but didn't play the rest of the year. And his stats there, 412 total yards, 48% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And then Cade McNamara. Last week, we found the news that he is transferring to East Tennessee State University. Didn't even know that was even a program, but here we are. The fall off for him has been absolutely crazy. No stats yet posted for that because obviously he has not played a game there, but we will monitor that. And then James Razar moved to wide receiver before he even left Iowa, but he has since transferred. We don't know yet. He has not made an announcement unless he has. I guess I haven't seen it. But with that all being said, holy shit, has the quarterback room just been absolutely atrocious since 2017. And you look like the last few years, 2023, our quarterback room, think about it, was Marco Linez, Deacon Hill, Cade McNamara. And think about where those 3 guys all went to. They all went to FCS programs. Elon, Utah Tech. And actually, Elon, I don't even know if Elon is an FCS program. They might be like D2. I have no idea. But Elon, Utah Tech, East Tennessee State, those 3 quarterbacks, those were our 3 quarterbacks 2 years ago. Think about that. And then going into last year, spring ball, that was our quarterback room. Again, Marco Linez, Deacon Hill, Cade McNamara, and then James Razar. No wonder, because it was reported, he never came out and said it, but apparently from sources, Tim Lester was like, this is the worst quarterback room I've ever been a part of in my coaching career. Now, once again, he would never say that publicly, but that is what inside sources have said that he has said or thought. And rightfully so. It's just so bad. And you think of like a guy like Cade McNamara. And, started at Michigan, led Michigan to the playoffs. Now, was he the main reason? Probably not. The surrounding cast obviously was a major part, but he was still the quarterback for them. Led them to the playoffs. Led them to win a Big Ten championship. Comes to Iowa. Doesn't have much success. Obviously, injuries played a huge part. And then he has yet now went to East Tennessee State. Like, think about it, like 3 years ago, if someone would have told you that Cade McNamara 3 years from now or 4 years from now is going to be at East Tennessee State University, no one would believe you. It's absolutely crazy. And it just shows how bad the quarterback room has been and why, you look at Tim Lester, that is like the biggest thing that he is trying to solve first. Now, yes, new offense, new playbook, but the biggest thing is we got to get the quarterback room right. We got to change things up. And you think about it now, it's been night and day difference. Go back to last year. As we stand last year at this time, our quarterback room was James Razar, Cade McNamara, Deacon Hill, and Marco Linus. All those guys have gone, and they've all gone to really bad programs for a reason. They're not very good. And now you fast forward to now, our quarterback room, Jimmy Sullivan, Jackson Stratton, Brendan Sullivan, Hank Brown, Mark Gronowski. Can you get much better than that? I mean, like, seriously. And that's what makes me so excited for what's to come, because things like that, just that change right there, that is the biggest thing that Tim Lester had to solve. And he has solved it in literally 1 year. Think about it. He wasn't even here a year ago right now. He didn't get hired until the end of January, and he didn't come into Iowa until the first parts of February. And think about just in 1 year how he has changed that quarterback room. And we can sit here and we can nitpick this last year, like, oh, the passing game still wasn't that good. There are still things about the offense that wasn't good. But I'm sorry, when you don't have a good quarterback room, those things aren't going to happen. You're not going to get the passing game going when you don't have good quarterbacks. And so once you solve that, everything else will get easier and come way easier for you. And so I'm just really excited. I'm just loving everything Tim Lester has done. Creates, once again, like for me, it creates something that I'm just looking forward to. And I'm really excited for spring ball. I know Mark Gronowski is obviously not going to be playing, and that does suck. But seeing Hank Brown, seeing Brendan Sullivan, seeing what they can do, it's a lot better than what we were at last year for spring ball, where it was Deacon Hill, a half-crippled Cade McNamara, and Marco Linus. I mean, come on. Can you spot the difference? So, well, that will do it for this episode. We will end it there. Our next episode, which Tyler will be back, we'll probably do one in the next couple of weeks or so. We're going to do some way too early kind of predictions going into next year for 2025. And then we'll have other things, obviously, around the corner as well. So stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you guys for listening, and go Hawks.